In the quiet town of Hollow Creek, legends were not just stories, they were warnings. Among them, none was more feared than the tale of the Headless Horseman. Every autumn night, he was said to ride through the forest, searching for those who carried the sins of the past. Ethan Carter, a college student home for the weekend, laughed at such tales. To him, they were relics of superstition. But that evening, a chill swept through the streets as fog crept along the ground. The air was heavy, and the trees whispered as if speaking in a language Ethan did not understand. Drawn by a mix of curiosity and bravado, Ethan ventured toward the old forest path, the very place townsfolk warned to avoid. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the fog thickened around his ankles. His heart raced, yet he couldn't turn back. From the depths of the forest, a sound shattered the stillness. The rhythmic pounding of hooves. Ethan froze. The beat grew louder, echoing like a drum of doom. Emerging from the mist, a dark figure on a massive black horse appeared. Headless, with tattered garments fluttering in the wind, the horseman paused, sword gleaming faintly under the moonlight. A whisper floated through the fog, chilling Ethan to the bone. "Leave, or join the ride." Ethan ran, branches clawing at him as the hoofbeats followed, relentless and unstoppable. The forest seemed alive, watching, waiting. Ethan's legs burned as he sprinted through the fog-laden forest. Every snapping branch and rustling leaf sounded like a warning. The pounding of hooves behind him grew louder, faster, closer. He dared a glance over his shoulder. The horseman was there, riding with an unnatural speed, the black horse gliding over the forest floor as if weightless. Ethan's heart hammered, fear tightening its grip. There was no turning back now. The forest had become a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. He stumbled upon a clearing and froze. Moonlight revealed a circle of ancient stones, weathered by time. Ethan remembered the town's stories. These stones were part of a ritual to trap the horseman, to protect the townsfolk from his wrath. Breathless, he realized the horseman wasn't just chasing him, he was hunting him. Every step Ethan took, the horseman's sword gleamed, a silent promise of doom. Then a voice in his mind, deep and hollow, echoed, "You cannot outrun the past, nor the sins you carry." Ethan tried to rationalize it, to tell himself it was all in his head. But the fear was real, physical. His legs ached, and his lungs screamed for air. He needed a plan, or he wouldn't survive the night. In desperation, Ethan spotted an abandoned cabin at the edge of the clearing. Perhaps he could hide, barricade the door, and wait out the terror. He dove toward it, heart pounding, while the echo of hooves grew deafening. The forest seemed to close in, and Ethan realized that tonight, the legend wasn't just a story. It was alive. Ethan slammed the cabin door behind him, shoving a fallen chair against the hinges. The wood groaned under his weight as he tried to catch his breath. Outside, the fog swirled unnaturally, and the pounding of hooves rang like thunder, closer than ever. He peered through the dusty window. The horseman's black figure moved with impossible speed, circling the clearing, his sword glinting in the cold moonlight. Ethan's mind raced. How could he survive this? How could anyone? Inside the cabin, shadows stretched along the walls, warped by the flickering lantern Ethan had grabbed in his panic. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of mold and old wood. And then a whisper, barely audible, slithered through the room. "Do you wish to live, or merely run?" Ethan froze. His heart thudded. The voice was deep, hollow, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once.
He swallowed hard, gripping the lantern like a weapon. Desperation gave him a spark of courage. He remembered the stories, how the horseman had been bound long ago by a hidden artifact buried somewhere in the forest. The legend said it could banish him, but no one had dared seek it until now. Ethan forced himself to think clearly. If he could find the artifact, maybe he could stop this nightmare. But first, he had to survive until dawn. A shadow flickered across the cabin wall, faster than any human could move. The lantern light danced violently. Ethan backed against the far wall, realizing the horseman didn't just hunt him physically. He toyed with him, a predator toying with prey. The whispers returned, more insistent this time. You cannot hide. You cannot escape. Ethan's only choice was to leave the cabin. Heart pounding, he opened the door slowly, the fog curling around him like ghostly fingers. The forest awaited, alive, menacing, and unyielding. Every step forward was a gamble. Every rustle, every snap of a branch could mean the horseman was already there. And then Ethan saw it. A faint glow in the distance, strange and unnatural. Could it be the artifact? His only hope? Or another trap?
Ethan moved cautiously through the fog-laden forest, every step making the damp leaves crunch beneath his boots. The glow ahead pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. He squinted, an amulet lying atop a moss-covered stone, shimmering with an otherworldly light. He reached out, hesitated, and then grabbed it. The moment his fingers touched the metal, a surge of energy shot through him. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing through the trees. "Foolish mortal, do you think you can bind me?" Ethan's eyes darted around. The forest seemed to shift, trees bending, shadows stretching unnaturally. The horseman's hooves crashed somewhere behind him, yet he couldn't see the figure. It was as if the darkness itself hunted him. Clutching the amulet, he felt a strange connection. Visions flashed before his eyes. The horseman, centuries ago, a knight betrayed and cursed, his soul bound to the forest. The artifact was his anchor, the only thing that could sever the curse. A sudden wind howled. The horseman appeared, emerging from the fog like a nightmare made flesh. His headless form glimmered faintly under the moonlight, sword raised, black cloak flowing wildly. Ethan's hands shook as he raised the amulet, its glow brightening with his intent. A voice, deep and hollow, echoed in his mind. "Use it, or be lost forever." He focused, calling every ounce of courage he had. The amulet shone brighter, illuminating the horseman in stark, ghostly light. The ground trembled, the forest groaned, and for a brief moment it seemed the horseman faltered, hesitated. Then, with a roar like rolling thunder, the chase began again. Ethan ran, weaving between trees, the amulet's glow leading him, guiding him. Every step was perilous, every breath labored, but hope surged in him for the first time since the hunt began. Somewhere deep in the forest, a clearing awaited, where the curse could be broken, if he survived the ride there. But Ethan knew, one mistake, one moment of doubt, and he would become another soul trapped in the horseman's endless hunt. Ethan's lungs burned, and his legs ached as he sprinted through the forest. The amulet's light cut a narrow path through the oppressive darkness, revealing twisted roots and gnarled trees that seemed to reach for him. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, dancing like wraiths, and he could hear the distant, echoing crash of the horseman's hooves, closer now. Ahead, the forest opened into a shadowy expanse, the so-called Forest of Shadows. The trees here were massive, ancient, their bark blackened as if scorched, and the ground was covered in a thick, misty fog. Ethan knew this was where the curse was strongest. It was here the horseman drew power from the earth itself. The whispers returned, wrapping around him like chains. Ethan shook his head, trying to focus. I can do this. I have to. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist, headless, spectral, his armor gleaming faintly. The horseman swung his sword, slicing through the fog, and Ethan barely dodged. The amulet pulsed violently, almost burning his hand, but he clung to it. The horseman's voice echoed in his mind, distorted and hollow. You cannot escape. This forest will claim you, as it has claimed so many before. Ethan darted between the colossal trees, remembering the visions from the amulet. There was a stone altar in the center of the forest, marked with symbols that glowed faintly. That was the place, the only place he could use the amulet to break the curse. The chase intensified. The horseman's hooves struck the ground with deafening force, cracks forming in the forest floor. Ethan stumbled, but kept running, the light from the amulet illuminating his path. Shadows seemed to grow taller, stretching towards him, but he pressed on. Finally, he glimpsed the altar through the fog. Heart pounding, he sprinted the last stretch, barely escaping grasping branches. The horseman was right behind him, his cloak sweeping the mist like a black wave. Ethan reached the altar and threw himself down, holding the amulet high. The forest seemed to roar, the shadows shrieking. The amulet's light flared, blinding, illuminating the horseman in stark detail. His hollowed torso, the jagged stump where his head should be, and eyes that burned with unholy fire. The ground shook violently as the amulet's power began to activate. Ethan's hands burned, sweat streamed down his face, and for a split second, it seemed like the horseman would overwhelm him. But then the altar pulsed, a beacon of pure light piercing the darkness. And for the first time, the horseman faltered. The light from the amulet grew blinding, pushing the shadows back, but the horseman's presence was still suffocating. Ethan gritted his teeth, feeling the ground tremble beneath him as the forest seemed to resist the amulet's power. The spectral rider reared his horse, letting out a terrifying, wordless scream that echoed through the trees. The horse's hooves struck the altar, sending shards of stone flying, but Ethan held firm, gripping the amulet tighter. The power surged through him, connecting to the forest, the altar, and the curse itself. "You will not control me!" Ethan shouted, feeling his own voice resonate with the amulet's energy. The horseman charged, swinging his jagged sword with deadly force. Ethan raised the amulet, and a beam of searing light erupted, striking the rider head-on. The horseman let out an unearthly shriek, stumbling back as cracks of light ran across his form. The whispers of the forest grew louder, chanting in unison, as if the ancient woods themselves were aiding Ethan. He felt the spirits of past victims trapped in the curse flowing into him, giving him strength. With one final surge, Ethan plunged the amulet into the stone altar. The light exploded outward, blinding and pure. The horseman screamed, his form twisting and fracturing like shattered glass. Slowly, the shadows evaporated, leaving only the faint outline of a horse's hooves fading into mist. Silence fell. The forest was still, peaceful, almost alive with quiet energy. Ethan collapsed to the ground, exhausted but alive. The amulet dimmed in his hands, now a small, steady glow. The curse had been broken. As dawn's light filtered through the trees, Ethan stood, surveying the forest. The whispers were gone. The shadows had vanished. The headless horseman was no more. He turned and walked away from the forest of shadows, the amulet safely tucked in his pocket, knowing he had survived something that had claimed countless lives before him. And though the memory of that ride would haunt him forever,
He had finally put an end to the legend. Ethan disappeared into the mist, leaving behind only the stories of the Headless Horseman and the light of hope that no curse is eternal.